Welcome to the Geekdom podcast, where we read the book.
And then see the movie.
I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
And this week we discuss Ernest Cline's 2011 sci-fi novel, Ready Player One. Let's strap on our school-issued haptic gear and log into the Oasis. Copper key unlocked. All right, man, here we are, Ready Player One. I am so excited to talk to you about this book.
Yeah, I'm excited too, man.
I was so excited. I am so excited to hear what you think about this book. I felt like a lot of the references were gonna hit home for you, and I had a lot of fun. So I guess I'll say right off the top, I have read this entire book before, but you haven't. You know, you've been reading along. But yeah, like this book is really fun. It's just like I've seen it described as a beach read, which that means it's like easy to read, you do it while you're at the beach kind of thing. That it's this like geek holy grail kind of book that if you're not a geek, maybe you won't enjoy as much. I can see all of that, but hey, I am a bit of a geek and I don't mind a good pulpy beach read. And I enjoy it, man. It's a lot of fun.
I'm really enjoying it so far, and like you're definitely right in thinking that like it's pressing all the right buttons for me as far as references and all of that go. But it's not just the references. Like the actual story is really fun to read, and yeah, it might be something that's not the most deep and convoluted and crazy thing, but it's like the things that I like in pop culture and in literally like every form of pop culture are like being referenced, whether it's like name reference or like homage to like something that happens. And I don't know, I find it really fun. And also it's fun because like, I get most of the references, but every once in a while something will come up and I'll be like, I don't know that very well. And then I'll look it up or look into it and be like, now I should definitely check this out.
Yeah, that's cool for sure. And I feel like one of the secret, perhaps motives of Ernie Cline here is to get people to go out and experience a lot of this stuff, just like Halliday.
Yeah, hold on to the 80s. His whole childhood. I mean, I feel like there was a certain amount of buzz coming into this being adapted. And I remember when the book came out, I was excited to read it, but I never really got the chance. But since then, there's good buzz because people really do enjoy it, and then there's a certain buzz where it's like negativity towards it being just like reference porn. So it's just like nonstop references, and that's all that there is to this. The experience that I had with the material beforehand was hearing a lot of people say those things, and then hearing everybody say, "Oh, it's really fun," but it's definitely like a lot of references. And so as the promotional material for the movie started coming out, we were getting close to doing this project, I was like tempering my expectations. And since we've started this story, it's like, I mean, it's awesome, man. It's like, I shouldn't have been worried because like, this is like, you can be kind of like jaded and think about these things as like just straight up references. But like, these are the things that formed me and the things that I liked to do growing up. It's not just references to me. It's moments of childhood and moments growing up. And I love it.
Well, we fall into the target demo of this book. You know what I mean? Like
Definitely.
it's aimed right at us. And it's the stuff we grew up loving. I mean, you're maybe a little young, I would say would be the only thing, but I know that you love a lot of 80s movies and stuff to where it's still gonna work for you.
Yeah. There's definitely stuff that passes me by because like I just caught the very end of like the arcade generation and I started playing consoles and those movies I've gone back to see and stuff, but like those arcade like machines aren't as easy to get your hands on to play like classic games and stuff. So I've definitely played a lot of them and a lot of the references I get. But speaking of like getting references, there was a game that I hadn't played before, and we went to Ground Control, which is like a bar / arcade.
Yeah, it's an arcade, it's a bar, it's both. It's here in Oregon, it's here in Portland. James was just visiting me, for the first time, really, and I took him out to that, and I knew that Joust features prominently in this book, so we went and played some games of Joust, which I'm sure I'll share the pictures here, actually probably before this episode comes out, so you'll have seen that if you follow us on social media. And yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun that we were able to hit some of the some of the games that are referenced. There was actually more that we didn't get a chance to play that we could have, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. And my knowledge of actually playing, that was my first time playing Joust with you. And so now I just know way more about that game.
I mean, those classic games, like, you have to take them for what they are, and they're always way harder than, like, especially arcade stuff. Because they're meant to be quarter eaters, so you just pop a quarter and die.
Yeah, exactly.
They're really tough, and so there's like a steep learning curve, but then you kind of get the hang of it, and it's a fun time. And it was awesome because that game plays into this first part here, and it was a lot of fun to just be like, oh man, I totally know what he's talking about.
Yeah, so before we get any further, I think I should stop and kind of explain what this podcast is for anybody who maybe is checking it out for the first time. We track a book to its, film adaptation, sometimes new, sometimes old. So in this case, what we're going to do is 3 episodes, one for each part of this novel, or each level of this novel, as it's called. And then we'll move on. We'll go see the new movie, and we'll put an episode out discussing that. And we're planning for it to be 4-parter. So it should be a really deep dive, and we can just really get into everything that happens in this book and get really granular with it.
Yeah, and you had mentioned, I just want to agree with you about the fact that we are absolutely the bullseye for this demographic. Like, this is like absolutely 100% not going to hit everybody the same way that it hits us. But if you did grow up similarly to Luke and I, then I think that you'll definitely enjoy a lot of this. And even people who didn't necessarily, there's plenty of references, so you're going to enjoy those moments and callbacks.
Yeah, I think there's a lot in here to enjoy, regardless of who you are and what your background is. But it's just still going to be a different experience. But I did want to speak to that a little bit because, in general, I immediately got very strong Willy Wonka, Wonka and the Chocolate Factory kind of vibes from this book, and it was interesting to read later that was definitely the kind of the impetus for it. We'll get into that. I have some bio stuff we can talk about. But yeah, and so I want to say that, like, even though that is in and of itself kind of a reference, the plot of this book is really, to me, it seems unique and innovative. So it takes all this familiar material and it wraps it up in a story that is pretty unique and pretty original. So I want to give him some credit for that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I think he gets leveled a lot of criticism at him for not coming up with fresh ideas and just like referencing a million things. And I don't think that's fair.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what I was trying to get at, with like the idea that there's more to it than just the references. I totally agree. Like, it's there's a good story in here as well. It's a good story, period, and I enjoy the references, so it's amplified by that fact. But I think that it's just solid storytelling. Like, I didn't see a lot of it coming, and like it's a pretty good story.
Cool, man. All right, so before we get into the specifics and we start doing our kind of chapter by chapter, I want to tell you a little bit about Ernest Cline.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay, so Ernest Cline was born in 1972. So he was 8 years old at the dawn of the 80s, so he grew up in the 80s for sure. That was his, like, you know what I mean? That was his formative years. There we go.
Just for context, I was -3 when the 80s ended.
Yeah, and I was born in 85, so I kind of grew up in like the shadow of the 80s, like as it was starting, I grew up in the 90s.
Right.
So
I will say that I think a huge influence on my 80s love are my parents. So my parents grew up in that generation. Well, my parents grew up at the beginning of that generation really coming in. And I played Atari and I played like NES with my mom growing up, and my dad like loves 80s music. My mom loves 80s music. So
right, yeah, my dad had an Atari that I grew up playing, and so I played a lot of these really old games. I remember being just a little kid with my brothers and playing these old Atari games before we even had a Nintendo, Nintendo 1 or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So back to Ernie here. There isn't a ton about his like personal life. The one thing I was able to find is that he worked for a long time as a tech support. That makes sense. His favorite video game of all time is called Black Tiger.
Wow.
Also important. I saw an interview, and I'm always interested in story seeds. I think we've talked about it in our Annihilation episode, but it's always cool if I can hear something like what the original idea was. Mm-hmm. And he revealed in an interview that at his technical support job, he was spending a lot of time thinking about the future of the internet, and he started to believe that it was going to evolve into something that was a virtual universe, sort of a cross between World of Warcraft and Facebook. And so when he started to imagine that, he pictured a Willy Wonka-esque like creator who would design and build this game. And then the idea of him holding a big contest to find an Easter egg was kind of what grew out of that. And then there you go. That's the story seed that did everything.
I mean, he's not wrong. Like, I feel like that's definitely, we're heading towards this. Like, there's so much escapism that people want. There's so much conglomerate companies coming in and basically becoming the leading force in the world, that people are just going to be like, at some point, people are going to be like, fuck it, I'm not going to leave my VR. And we have like VR chat coming up. We have VR gaming, and it's like, it's on its way.
Yeah, I mean, and the world has changed dramatically in the 7 years since this book was released, too, you know? There's been huge strides in a lot of these areas, and we should definitely talk about that. I absolutely think that you know, this kind of thing is coming. This book is set in 2045, it's worth noting. So it is kind of near future, but only 27 years away from us right now, you know? Mm-hmm. So within our lifetimes, you know? He also wrote, now this is going to be interesting. Did you ever see the film Fanboys? Because he wrote the screenplay for that.
Yeah, I have seen that.
Did you know that?
I didn't know he wrote the screenplay, no.
Yeah, so I haven't seen it, but I guess it's about like Star Wars fandom or something?
Yeah, so it's three guys on a quest to go see a premiere of Star Wars Episode 1. So like Phantom Menace, after loving and growing up with the original trilogy. And kind of the adventures and hijinks that go on from that.
Yeah, so he wrote that before he wrote this novel. So he wasn't a complete unknown, you know what I mean, before this. In 2010, he sold Ready Player One in a bidding war to Crown Publishing Group, a division of Random House, who we are currently partnering with to give away some things. We gave away 2 books already, copies of this novel, and then we have 5 posters that we're giving out for people who sign up to our newsletter. So if you're hearing this and you haven't signed up to our newsletter yet, do that, and you can enter for a chance to win one of those movie posters.
Yeah, there's definitely still plenty of time to sign up.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. I mean, win in a bidding war between different publishing houses is like, that's, you know what I mean? Like, that's music to a writer's ears. You're just like, yes, that's what I want.
Exactly. Yeah.
A bidding war over your work is just like, that's always great. That's a wonderful thing to happen. Then even better, the film rights to the novel were sold the following day to Warner Brothers, with Cline attached to write the screenplay. So he actually co-wrote the screenplay to this movie, which is being directed by Steven Spielberg.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, to have seen him during those few days, you know what I mean? Like, I can't even imagine the joy that must have been.
Yeah, I mean, he's like some sort of like instant celebrity. It kind of mirrors what happens in the story.
Yeah, no, it really does. That's true. So he kind of I guess he predicted that something like this was going to happen maybe for himself. So yeah, the 10 months later, with the hardcover release coinciding with the paperback release, he revealed on his blog that both the paperback and hardcover editions of Ready Player One contain an elaborately hidden Easter egg. This clue formed the first part of a series of staged video gaming tests similar to the plot of the novel. The novel competition's grand prize was to be a 1981 DeLorean styled after the one that features in the novel. And that's in part 2. But the prize was awarded in 2012, so it took a year for the conclusion of it. I want to do more research into this, so I'm going to do more research into it for our second episode. Right now, I just kind of know that it happened, and I've heard that, and I think it's really cool.
That's crazy. So I should be on the lookout for some sort of like overarching Easter egg hidden in the text?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to try, I mean, I'll look it up and find out what the answer is, but if you want to like see if you spot anything, for sure. I'm sure it's very well hidden.
I was going to say, I feel like it takes a lot to find it, but I'll try. I'll do my best.
He has written another novel called Armada, which was released in 2015, and it has been rumored that he is working on Ready Player 2, the sequel to this one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. That is the, I think, unofficial name of it. But we'll see. No real information has come out about it at all, so...
If this film is successful, it'll probably accelerate that process.
Maybe, unless he pulls a George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, sure.
You never know. Since I've read the whole thing, that's a really interesting idea to me of a second novel. So we can definitely discuss that, and we should in our third episode, what we think that could possibly be. But I'm pretty ready to get into the nitty-gritties here. Let me ask you this. Did you really talk about what your expectations were going into this and how that might have been different once you actually got into it, into the story?
Like I said before a little bit, was I had this like negative connotation that it was this like wish fulfillment, like glorifying references and all this stuff. And like that's...
So what did you think that was going to look like, I guess is my question for you. Like, what did you think?
I thought that it was going to be like a shill, like some like thing that had no story, completely product placement, you know what I mean? Like that's what I thought, because I didn't know that much about the story, and I just, saw what some people said, and it's just like people are going to think what they're going to think, and if they don't love this kind of thing, they might see it that way. But I don't know, man. It's just a completely different than I was expecting. I thought that this movie might end up being a little bit of like just, like I was saying, like product placement-y references for nostalgia, just straight up nostalgia porn. And because that's kind of what I've been getting from so many people. When even people who really, really enjoy it, they're like, oh, there's a lot of references, and like and like people will say like it's good, but it's like it's a fun read. So after having read the first part, I'm like invested, and I think that there's like cool stuff going on.
Well, that's the thing. Regardless of how the movie turns out, I feel like this is a fun book. You know what I mean? So at the very least, I'm the kind of person who believes that a movie adaptation doesn't ruin a book for me. So no matter what the movie is, I'm going to enjoy this book. And I'm reading it the second time, and I'm still enjoying it. It's a different experience. I'm catching new things and thinking about things a little differently. But it's been a lot of fun even going through the second time.
Yeah.
But I think we should get on to our spoiler section now, if you're ready.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump in.
All right, so full spoilers for part 1. Let's get into it. So the book begins with level 1, and it's chapter 0, which is it's kind of this announcement of the contest. It's just Halliday's message, right? We meet James Halliday. We learn about the world, how there's disease, poverty, catastrophic climate change hitting everything. Halliday shows up. It's almost written like a screenplay. It's kind of the thought I had. Like it's almost written like a description of, because you're seeing a video, right, that everybody receives in an email, and across the entire world. And it's Halliday, this eccentric billionaire, and he's died, and he's released this video upon his death, and it's him like dancing at an 80s dance. And then he becomes morphs into his funeral, and he is like cracking jokes and having a great time and like looking down. He's younger, like it's his younger avatar, but he's looking down at like the old man himself who's dead. So this is why I was getting very strong Wonka vibes, right? Like he's eccentric.
Right.
We get discussion about, he talks about the very first Easter egg, which was a secret room written in the code of a video game called Adventure, which I think is that's really cool, like I didn't know that. So that's a fun little, these kind of like little details are cool too, because it's learning about like the dawn of video gaming and all this stuff.
Yeah, I always find that really interesting, because I always just wondered like how do we get from like Pong to all these other things, and like where did Easter eggs start and all this stuff. And so I love learning stuff like that. Yeah,
and the story was basically that the coder wasn't allowed to like put his name on it. So instead he hid it in a secret room where it actually put his name in there, you know what I mean, coded by whatever, and that was like the first Easter egg in a video game. So yeah, he outlines this contest. He reveals that there are 3 keys: a copper key, a jade key, and a clear crystal key. These 3 keys open 3 gates, and then he gives this little bit of like doggerel poetry kind of ending, and that becomes their like one clue that is the start of this contest. So this is what he says. 3 hidden keys open 3 secret gates, wherein the errant will be tested for worthy traits. And those with the skill to survive these straits will reach the end where the prize awaits. Now, if you can get over the fact that it's 4 identical rhymes, that's your little poem you get there. And that's the clues that they get, you know what I mean? That's what launches this whole thing. So I don't know if I fully described it, but the idea is that if you complete his, series of tests, or to get these 3 keys and these 3 gates, that eventually you will get the Easter egg, which will then make you inherit the entire control of the company and his like multi-billion-dollar fortune.
Yeah, I guess we should also say he created this game that's like we kind of have like talked about some, but it's this crazy game called the Oasis, and it's basically like it's all VR. You can touch things, you can manipulate things within the world, and everybody has like their own login, and it's kind of like registered to like you specifically, like it won't log you anybody else in on your profile, and you can't really make other profiles, but sometimes that happens. And so
yeah, we'll get into a lot of the rules. I do like the way that the information about the Oasis is kind of slowly revealed to us in a really clever way.
Yeah.
So we'll try and do that too. But yeah, basically it's an online simulation, almost like a Second Life kind of thing, but it's all VR, and people live their everyday lives doing that. Like you can work in there, all this stuff. So he says, let the hunt begin, and then we learn about the high score list, which is on his website now. It's called the scoreboard. And he also includes something called the Anorak's Almanac, which is a 1,000-page long thing, like stream of consciousness thoughts that he had about 80s pop culture and all that stuff. And everybody can download that, and that's like the clue book where you're going to want to read and study all this stuff, right? And we learned that there is a group of people who quickly start hunting after it, and they are known as the Egg Hunters, which quickly gets portmanteaued into Gunters. Then we get a little bit about the history after that. So for the first year, it becomes like a global sensation. Everybody's looking for it. Everybody wants to do this thing and find it and find the money, and like the news media is all about it, and it's really exciting. And then after a year, no one finds it, not even a hint, no clues, nothing, no first key, anything, right? And so people start to lose interest. And so over time, about 5 years go by, and people lose interest. People start to doubt that he even exists. They think maybe he was just trolling them, or that either that or he made it too hard to find, and no one will ever find it. This is an interesting little flash forward, but the chapter 0 ends with our main character, who speaks in first person, saying that in 2045, an avatar name appeared on the high scored list. It was an 18-year-old kid, and then he says, that kid was me, and I'm going to tell you the story of how it really happened. And then we get chapter 1.
As I was reading this first chapter, I felt like this is what I've been training for my whole life. It's like this moment when like this
right.
super rich guy makes this crazy game, and then all of our knowledge of all of these things comes to play, and I can win tons of money in a huge company.
Yeah, man. I think especially for me, because like I'm a big gamer, but also the fact that it's like sci-fi and fantasy books, and D&D plays such a big role in this. It also just like it really hits me. I mean, that's my bread and butter.
It's awesome because it's not just like, it could have easily just been games, but it's like all things
it's
that
movies,
I love.
Yeah, it's everything.
Comic books, video games, books, movies, music, TV shows. It's everything.
So in chapter 1, we meet Wade Watts, and we learn that he lives somewhere called the Stacks. He's poor, and the Stacks are basically a trailer park where people have, they've run out of space. So instead of having, sprawling trailer parks, they've started stacking them on top of each other and then creating sprawling trailer parks. This is really cool, kind of like play on like the cyberpunk idea of these like super cities. But instead of it being like cities, it's these like slums, right? Like it's I don't know, really, this is a really clever idea. And I really like it. Yeah,
and in a time where like technology is like, you can still get a hold of this technology but be really poor, and the environment's completely ruined because of mankind and all of this stuff. I don't know, and the difference between the poor and the rich, the fact that like there's tons of people living in slums, and yet there's still like super ultra rich people.
Yeah, it's very dystopian, it's a very kind of bleak view of the future where everybody is so kind of lives such miserable lives that they all log into the Oasis to escape it. So depending on how you look at it, that could potentially be very depressing. So that's an interesting kind of backdrop to this, right? Like it's immediately this kind of really interesting world. We learn about Wade Watts, and we see we learned that his father is dead. He was shot when he was very young, and that he named him Wade Watts because he thought it sounded like a superhero name, like Peter Parker. I also thought it was funny that it's WW, which is just like Will Wheaton, which is who the narrator is on the audiobook.
Yeah.
I don't know if you made that connection, but I thought that was pretty funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. It makes me think of Willy Wonka.
Yeah, there you go. Another one. So we learned that his mother was this kind of virtual call girl who, an escort, in the Oasis. And so because of that, she didn't have a lot of time for him, but he does seem to have like really fond memories of her. But he was basically raised by the Oasis that has these like educational systems that will like teach you everything you need to know as even a young child.
And I thought that was awesome. That's the kind of school I wanted to go to as a kid, because I was always like, oh man, school. But then if it was like virtual school where like your teachers were taking you on these crazy trips like into like a virtual heart, and then like, up to a volcano and all that stuff, like that's really engaging and cool.
And this is also another dividing point, I think, for this book, because some people I know for a fact, especially older generations, it seems like, are going to hear this and go like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. You know what I mean? Like this is the end of civilization, and just think it's terrible. Whereas I think we're of the generation where this isn't as frightening to us. The idea of this, right? Like of a virtual life,
right?
So we also get kind of a diatribe here from Wade about religion, and he seems to really be against it. And he talks about how he has kind of an existential crisis when he's young. And he seems to equate that with his love of video games. So like, and the Oasis in general. The idea that life is so short and the idea of having to die is such a terrifying concept that seeking escape through the Oasis and this other life is like the one thing that brings him joy. Because he doesn't believe in an afterlife and all that stuff. And I can totally identify with that because I am also a deeply agnostic person. And I think it is kind of a good explanation for beyond just video games, but entertainment in general. Like, why do I pour myself into these books? Why do I get so obsessed about movies and television? Why do I play video games when we're all going to die? You know what I mean? But yeah. It's kind of an escape from the cold, hard realities of reality.
For sure. I mean, I think that, like you said before, older generations would look at this and be horrified, but like, I think our generation, and I mean theirs to an extent as well, but like I think that our generation is a generation of escapists, and like it's something about realizing like, oh, your life is short and you want to have experiences, but it's also like if I think our generation is like tapped into this sort of idea that like if you enjoy something, do that. You know what I mean? Like maybe an older generation would be like, oh, spending time with people is the perfect way to spend the day. And it's like, we feel that like playing a video game and chatting with your friends is the equivalent of that. We don't see any difference between that sometimes. I don't know. We just have a different scale of seeing what is worth our time, I guess.
For sure. So we learn about Wade's home life too. He now lives with his Aunt Alice, who is a pretty terrible person. She has a series of boyfriends that are all more awful than the next. The one she currently has is this like ex-con, and they come in and steal Wade's laptop, and they're going to pawn it for money and all this stuff. They're pretty terrible. He leaves, going down a ladder to kind of sneak out. He goes down, and we meet a woman named Mrs. G. Oh, he's outside of Oklahoma City too. I don't know if I said that. That's where these particular slums are located. So I just imagine just like really flat, nothing to see kind of area with these giant slums. So totally makes sense. So he takes the ladder down. He talks to Mrs. G, who's like the one nice person to him, there. And she offers him food, but he turns it down. And she seems to be someone who's friendly to him. And that's maybe the one person we meet in the real world that is friendly to him, right? She is like really religious. And he has an interesting thing where he doesn't want to throw stones. I think he even says like people in glass houses should shut the fuck up or something like that, like quoting Halliday, and essentially saying that like his obsession with entertainment and VR and all this other stuff, he equates it to her obsession with religion, which is I think a pretty astute observation. So he gets down to the floor level and he goes to this abandoned van. The floor is like really like. Everything's abandoned down there. There's all these trapped cars that people have just left. It's like really dirty and it's down in the shadows. Like sun doesn't even really get down there. Very interesting. It reminded me of like Fifth Element maybe when he goes to like the lowest level in that city. But it's in these slums. So he's down there and he has this abandoned van that he knows like he can barely get into it. He has to wiggle between cars, and he has the key and he gets inside of it. And this is his bat cave, he calls it, his VR hub. He has a folding lawn chair in there, a portable heater, and it's just this little van, and that's where he spends his time when he logs into the Oasis, and he has some backup computers in there and stuff. He has a bike that he rides to generate electricity to charge the battery. And this is just his little hideout, you know?
Yeah, I think this is really cool. But I did have a question about it. What do you think? Mm-hmm. Because it seems like in this VR, it's not like you're like transported into like a virtual world and that's where you are while you lay unconscious. Like this is a moving VR, so it's like whatever you're doing or feeling, you're actually doing. How does he have enough space to walk around and do stuff inside of a van?
So he describes the way you walk by being a series of subtle hand motions.
So what about like fighting and stuff? Like I don't know. It just seems like it wouldn't be a lot of space, but I guess he makes it work.
Well, he doesn't have the more expensive like in-depth rigs, so I think his motion is more limited. Mm-hmm. He walks with some sort of hand motion. It's a little vague, but yeah, it is important to note that these visors are describing some sort of low beam laser that like projects the Oasis onto your iris. So on one hand, it is very immersive because it fills your entire vision. But on the other hand, yeah, like your physical body is still in the real world, and you still have to move through like hand motions, not through walking and like the normal way you would move. So you would have to learn how to control your character and all that stuff. It would be a process, I think, for sure.
This also, I mean, this makes me, obviously there's plenty of VR stories out there in sci-fi and stuff, but it reminds me a lot of like Sword Art Online was an anime that came out recently not even recently, probably around the same time that this book came out, honestly, but it's like the similar thing where it's like, it was like an RPG, but it's a virtual RPG. But I think that's more of the RPG the VR that you get like transported into. And I don't know, that's a fun story that I was thinking about a lot during this story.
I haven't seen that anime, but I can totally see that. And I think I've heard about it, and it seems to have a similar kind of premise, at least that you go into this virtual place and have battles. So we learned that he's got this old crappy rig, but it is what essentially is given out to anybody who enrolls in school, which we later learn is through this program that Halliday actually created. And that's the only reason he has this rig he's able to use. And he has to keep it hidden from his aunt because otherwise she'd pawn it and he'd have nothing, I guess. And so then we learn that he goes to school, and we learn what school looks like for him, which is done in the Oasis, which I think is already immediately a pretty cool idea, that he attends high school completely virtually. And he's known as Wade 3. Importantly, his like avatar name, which is Parzival, is not revealed to people in school.
Yeah, Parzival with a Z. So Parzival, but put the Z where the C is.
Spelled with a Z, yeah.
Because that's the only username he was able to get of Parzival. Yeah.
Which is fun. I mean, that's a lot like, when you try and create a name on any video game, like an online video game, and you have to play with the spelling a little bit to get it because someone's already stolen the one you like.
Right.
So a bully throws an insult at him, and this is pretty cool because he just like throws back a retort and then mutes him, which like there's a cool like dynamic here where everybody can appreciate the idea of attending this virtual school because like bullying is not really a thing when you can do that. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
I don't know. It's pretty cool. They goes to class, and like you were referring to earlier, they're able to do these awesome lessons where let's talk about the sun. So then they like, travel virtually to the sun and like walk around in it, and, like all this stuff. Like it's a whole immersive educational environment. And I really like the idea of this as something that I think there are some innovative ideas in here. You know what I mean? And where I'm like, people should pay attention to this because I think there is something to it. I don't know. They're already doing VR stuff, but like it could be so much more.
Yeah, there's something in this that I was like, holy shit, when they make that's going to be huge. And remind me, it has something to do with the first gate. So just remind me to talk about that.
Okay. So we learned that in real life, he's always been overweight, and that his avatar is like a handsome, taller, stronger version of himself. I'm going to go ahead and say that is something I remember when the movie was first announced. A lot of people didn't love about the main character who was cast, and that he was this kind of handsome young guy who seemed really fit. And they're like, that doesn't look like how he's described in the book. But, it's a movie. Everybody's going to look good in a movie. That's kind of the rule of Hollywood.
Yeah, I thought of that when I was reading it. I didn't know that in the book he was supposed to be like, have acne and be like bigger. So whenever they said that, I was like, well, he doesn't look like that.
Yeah. So we learn about his complicated and, understandable, nerdy relationship with women, where he is very shy and he doesn't know how to talk to them, and he kind of treats them like another species. And this is another thing that I know is, it continues to grow. This is just when we first hear about it. There are some problematic things in here that I'd like to kind of address as we go. And I know that there's been some criticism within the community, the writing community, about some of this stuff. So I don't know how much of it jumped out to you, but I was particularly trying to pay attention to it this time because I am aware of these criticisms of this book.
Yeah, I assume it has like to do with how he thinks of this girl and how the stuff that he does.
For sure. And it's all tied up in the whole like Gamergate and like just, there's some really shitty stuff that goes on in the gaming world and how nerds, tend to like sexualize women in their community and not really think of them as people.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of shitty stuff with that. And I would say that this book ultimately, I think, has a good heart. And I think it comes from a good place, in my opinion. But I do think there are some unfortunate signs of kind of that nerd culture that I think the author was steeped in, and his imagining of this character. I think it kind of bleeds through. I don't know for sure. I don't know him, but I don't know. It's interesting. We can talk about it kind of case by case.
This is, I feel like stereotypically, that's how a person like this could end up being as a person. So it's like,
right.
Maybe that was more true to what he wanted to do. I don't know. But I think, like you said, this book does do a lot of things that are good. Like, I think he does do things to show like women are empowered in this world and stuff. But like you said, there's also the flip side to that. So
yeah. Like I said, I ultimately think that it has a good heart. So that's kind of my defense of it, even though I think there are times where maybe it's not handled the best way it could have been. But anyway, let's continue on. So we learn about the planet where the schools are located is a planet called Ludus. And this is like a planet of all schools. It's just all these schools sprawl over the entire surface of the planet. And there's these like expanses of like procedurally generated forests that like in like streams and rivers and mountains and stuff that separate them. Other than that, it's just like a planet full of schools.
Yeah.
And we learned that Wade is this low-level noob. He's level 3. He has like an iron sword and padded leather armor or something. He has like nothing and no money. And he can't afford to like go anywhere because it costs money to leave where he's at. And that's the other important thing, I guess, is like your avatar is in a fixed location within this universe of the Oasis. And when you log out and like log back in, you'll be wherever you logged out.
Right.
So your location stays fixed.
So I think you mentioned that it's importantly some people hide their names so that like you don't know what username connects to what person in the real world. And that's why he changes his name at school, because in order to register at school, he had to give his information. So he's Wade 3 at school, so nobody knows who he is in the Oasis proper.
Well, also, school had rules against it because they didn't want people to be like raising their hand and someone have to be like Pimp Master 22 or whatever, like what.
Yeah.
So people had to go by their their first names, and then he gets assigned Wade 3 because he's the third Wade to sign up or whatever, I guess. So we're learning a lot about the world here. So bear with me as I kind of describe a lot of this, but we learn about Gunters have clans. And a lot of these clans have a lot of infighting, but the main principle behind these clans is that they all swear a solemn oath that, like, if anyone in the clan unlocks wins the egg, that they're gonna like split it between all of them, like the winnings, and then they all help each other. Is the kind of the premise of it. So they all share information with one another and help each other to do it. And people who aren't in clans are called solos, and that's what Wade is. And they all work strictly alone without sharing information. You know what I mean? So they kind of look down on the clans, but not as much as a organization known as the Sixers. So the Sixers are this evil corporation that are searching for the Easter eggs so that they can seize control of the Oasis, start charging an exorbitant monthly fee, and basically ruin the entire thing, you know, and turn it into this like advertisement nightmare, and you know,
they want to make money.
They want to make money, but then they're going to shut out, like all the poor people will no longer be able to use the Oasis is kind of the thing. So none of the Gunters want them to win, obviously. And we learned that they have like hundreds of thousands of however many employees that work for them in exchange for a paycheck, and inhabit these avatars that all look alike and have a certain number attached to them. And they're just out there also participating in this hunt. But what's funny, I thought, is that like all of Gunters kill them on sight, and they have like contests for like hunting them and killing them and all this stuff. So there's like this ongoing war between them and the Gunters.
Yeah, I can totally see that happening too, with like the community of like hardcore gamers versus like the conglomerate companies trying to, you know, we're seeing this today. Gamers against some of the people who want to just milk them for money.
We also learn about a character named Artemis, who is this particular Gunter that Wade follows her blog, and it's like a series of her investigation, and she blogs about different things that she studies in the almanac and all this stuff. And so he has this cyber crush on her. There is also here a repeated, I think they keeps being repeated by Wade, where he keeps worrying that she's actually a 300-pound man named Chuck in his basement, and he repeats this joke several times, and every time it's a little bit cringy for me because it's a little bit homophobic. It's also a little bit of like body shaming. It's just a little bit of shittiness. You know what I mean? It's like he is very worried that he could potentially be attracted to someone who doesn't fit the image that he has in his mind of them. Which, on one hand, like, I get it, and that's kind of the nature of online relationships. But on the other hand, it's kind of shitty. I don't know.
That was definitely one of the parts that I felt like was like, oh man. But like at the same time, I can see somebody, you know what I mean? I can see a certain type of person doing that.
Well, and if anybody's ever done, got like even dabbled in like online romance over the years, you know, you're playing video games or even just like online dating and stuff, like there is a big risk that the person you're talking to looks nothing like the person you think they are. You know what I mean? Like people can post whatever they want.
Right.
And so that's kind of what he's trying to get at, but I don't know, just the way he handles it's a little icky to me, but let's move on. We also meet his best friend H, who they hang out in this virtual basement. He's a very important character as well. They practice video games together. He's another solo, so they don't really help each other, but they kind of do. They like practice and talk about stuff a lot and have like these little competitions where it's like who knows the most lore, or what they call canon. And it's his best friend. H calls him Z. They have this hangout in this. He invites him to come hang out in this basement while he's at school, and he's able to do that. We also meet IROC here, which is kind of an important side character, who is this like, he calls him a twink, which is an unfortunate term, but it is something from video games that people use to refer to characters who have like really, really good gear, even though they're low levels, and like maybe spend a lot of money on the game to get to that point. Maybe they didn't earn it. So yeah, I apologize for that term, but that is a gaming thing I've heard, and that's what he's using here. And it describes what IROC is. He has all this gear that he hasn't earned, but he's kind of a shitty guy. So it's like weird that he's even like there, but you know, it is what it is.
They're in this hangout, and this guy shows up, and he kind of like always like, what is it? What would you say that he does? He just comes and messes with them or something, and they don't really love the guy. Like they think he's like, they kind of mess with him back, and he's not like part of their group or anything.
I think H even says like, I let him in here just to remind us of what the average Gunter is like, so that we can feel like most people aren't as obsessed as they are, kind of thing. Yeah. Which is kind of a shaky reason I think to have him there, but that's what H says.
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of gamer talk in this section too. Like they call each other posers and like all this stuff. And like, there's a lot of like, you know, leet and like just a lot of the gamer terminology being thrown around, which if you're a gamer, it's like fine. Like I expect that. But like to the average reader who maybe isn't a gamer, this could be like a really weird section where maybe you don't understand the jargon.
Yeah. That's why I feel like this is like for us, like for like a certain demographic of people.
All right, now that we've set up the world and all these major characters, I'd like to stop and take a second to tell you about Audible.
Yeah, Audible is an audiobook app that you can use to listen to many of their books. They have like 80,000 or something like that, right?
Some insane number. Yeah, I think it's 80,000 plus.
Yeah, so they have been nice enough to give us an affiliate link. It's audibletrial.com/ink2film. And with this free trial that they gave us, you get 30 free days to their service and one free audiobook out of their entire collection.
Yeah, you can use it to listen to Ready Player One like I did. I really enjoyed this audiobook. It's got Will Wheaton narrating it. So if you're listening to this, maybe wondering if you want to read this book, I highly recommend it. Go out and get the audiobook with our link. But other than that, I'll go ahead and recommend Fahrenheit 451, which very different kind of book, but it's still sci-fi. It's by Ray Bradbury. It's considered a classic novel. The reason I'm going to recommend it, though, is because the adaptation for HBO just got announced, I don't know, in the last few weeks, starring Michael B. Jordan. And I'm really excited about that. And so we've decided we are going to cover it. We don't know exactly how that's going to play out yet because they haven't given us a hard release date. But as soon as they do, we'll let you know. But yeah, I love that book. I'm excited to reread it. And you should definitely go out and get the audiobook version of it. And that's audibletrial.com/ink2film. You use that, you can get it for free. All right, so I'm going to move it along a little faster here. We get some scenes of him in school. We learn about a class called Advanced Oasis Studies, which he aces because he just knows everything. And he's kind of like the annoying kid who like always raises his hand in this class, which I think is funny. But it's interesting that it's taught in school, right? It's people studying this simulation that they all participate in. Through this simulation, we learn about backstory, which is important, about James Halliday and his friend Ogden Morrow. We learned that they had a D&D group early on, and that their friendship is legendary. They grew up and formed Gregarious Games, which is the company that produces the Oasis. Ogden Morrow was more of the PR guy. He was more gregarious Games. He was more outgoing. They were both pretty eccentric and kind of odd, but it seems like he's the one who's maybe better integrated into society. So he was the face of the company, while Halliday was this kind of eccentric brain behind it, I guess. And it reminds me a lot of the Apple, Wozniak and
Jobs.
Thank you. That kind of setup, right?
Yeah, that definitely is the vibe that I got from these two.
So they started out as game developers. They invented different kind of text games and simple games in the early years, and their company over time becomes more powerful, more money, and they invent the Oasis. And the Oasis takes a one-time payment of 25 cents to create your avatar, which I think was a pretty cool kind of reference to the quarter-operated games, right, of the 80s. So that's your one. You put in a quarter and you get to log into the Oasis. Wade's in Latin class, as he's kind of daydreaming about things. Oh, I wanted to say that he lists Halliday's favorite authors, and there's a lot of great stuff in there. A lot of authors that I'm sure we'll touch on one day. But one that jumped out at me, I don't know if you noticed it, Richard K. Morgan was listed among the favorite authors list, which we just did Altered Carbon a month ago or 2 months ago, whatever it was. So that was pretty cool to see him shouted out there.
Definitely. And Richard K. Morgan, had only been around for like 10 years when this book came out. So he was seeing him as like an up-and-comer that becomes a legend. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah, that might have been true. But, for whatever reason, Ernest Cline included him in the list, which I thought was fun. He also says something here about having a cute, geeky girl's fetish, which is a little bit it's like you know what I mean, like you're a hetero dude and sure you like cute geeky girls, but to kind of like call it a fetish is, I don't know, it's just kind of gross. I don't know, it's very, like I said, it's reductive, you know what I mean? It's like taking all women, reducing them to something sexualized. Which I just want to be aware of. This is something that completely might not bother people, but I run in circles enough to where I know that this is an issue that people have identified in this book. So we learned that Wade's specialty is arcade-style video games. He's really, really good at these. We've also learned that he has figured out a clue, and this is his first clue, and that is that the Tomb of Horrors is a
there's a reference to the Tomb of Horrors and in a error in the almanac. I don't know how much of this I want to get into the specifics of, but there's a clue nested in there that he knows that the Tomb of Horrors is somehow important, and then he also learns that all these other Gunters have figured the same thing out, and that's kind of where we're at. Like, no one has figured out how it's important, they just know that it is. So he's daydreaming in Latin class when all of a sudden he has this like eureka moment, right? And they're conjugating the words, and they're conjugating the word to learn, and to learn is ludus, right? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes. And
he thinks like, oh, holy shit, and he like falls out of his chair, and he's thinking about the rhyme, and he's like, you have much to learn part of it means that students on this planet, and so he has this moment of realization where he says, holy shit, it's probably here on this planet where I've been all this time. I think it's this is a cool reveal. This is it makes sense that he would do this. He would put it in a place where like poor people who are just low levels could have access to starting this quest out. Totally makes sense. Totally buy it. It works for this character. And it's a cool reveal. I don't know if I completely buy that 5 years into this contest, no one would have made that Latin word conjugate. You know what I mean? No one would have made this leap, but maybe. Like, I buy it just enough.
I mean, me too, yeah. I feel like there's people out there, especially because of what's at stake, like, and all the resources at the Sixers' disposal.
Yeah. You would think every word would be translated to different languages, and then people would look to where, like, how that might line up with something in the Oasis. Like, I can see a process in which someone would have found this, but it's just obscure enough to where maybe it didn't happen. And Latin's like a dead language, so, you know what I mean? Maybe.
Yeah, and then he uses that like the fact that it's on this planet to with it, like paired with the Tomb of Horrors thing that he knows, to kind of like look for because he like looks at a map of the planet.
That's true. So you have to have figured out this Tomb of Horrors connection to even get to this point. So now he's made this connection between Ludus and the Tomb of Horrors, and he uses a map, and he finds an area that fits the description from the D&D module Tomb of Horrors to find an area on the planet that looks like this. He comes up with he has like a scam that he runs where he teleports, claiming that he's going to go to a sporting event at this other school on the other side of the planet. So he's able to teleport for free because he doesn't have any money, and he heads out into the woods, finds the area on the map, and digs into the ground, opens it up, and enters into the Tomb of Horrors. So what did you think of this whole D&D kind of setup thing? Like, did this catch you by surprise that it was going to be so prominent?
Yeah, I did. I didn't think D&D would be the thing. And what's funny is, like, I am super into all this stuff, but D&D is something that I never really did much of growing up because I didn't really have a group to do this kind of stuff with. So, like, that's like, if there's like a section of my geekdom that's lacking, it's like a lot of the D&D stuff. But a lot of that is like built into other games and RPGs and stuff since. But I thought it was really cool that he's going to like the source of nerddom, like D&D is like looked back at as like the beginning of it all, and
that's that's something I've played D&D my entire life, and it's something I've been super steeped in. So that's my area of if I had my strength is there. Yeah, I was thinking about that too. Like, D&D is the prototype of this, right? It's like I think they even make this point in the book, but it's this early version of this VR, essentially, but it's all just done through your imagination instead, right? Before we had any fancy gear, we just had to imagine it. But it is kind of the same idea, right? It's this escapist, it's a created world, it's a game. So in a lot of ways, it's the precursor to the Oasis.
Yeah, I definitely see that.
So using the Tomb of Horrors as a guide, he's studied this module, he knows the map, he's able to get inside, loot a bunch of rooms. It is just like the Tomb of Horrors. He has to jump over all these traps and like disarm some of them. He gets several magic items, which he had never had before, like a plate armor, I think, and a sword. And then he finally gets to the last room where he knows there's a demi-lich that is supposed to be kind of awaiting him or spawn at some point. But instead of spawning, it's sitting on this throne looking at him when he walks in. And yeah, he ends up going up, and the Lich talks to him and like asks him what he seeks, and the Lich in the original Tomb of Horrors doesn't speak, so this is a difference. And he finds out that this is this Lich challenges him to a joust, and he agrees, and all of a sudden the throne transforms into an old arcade version of Joust, which Here we are. Here we are. We've arrived at it.
Yeah.
I want to know what you felt when you were like, holy shit, this is the Joust moment. Like, this is why we played it.
I loved it, dude. I was like, yes, I love this. Like, I actually really, really like that game. And it's like, what's funny is like, we played it in like the classic way that I feel like people played back then, was just like, start playing it, spend your quarters, figure out the game. Like, there's no like instructions really. It's like, flap your wings and move around. And I just thought it was cool that this is like one of the games that he had like really practiced at, because it was in his almanac, in Holiday's almanac. So he played it a bunch, and he'd like got a bunch of experience doing it. And then he goes and plays the Lich, the Demi Lich, right?
Yeah, he plays against the Lich in an arcade game at the heart of a dungeon. It's so cool. It's so nerdy, but like, I don't know, the idea of like standing side by side with this Lich and playing him, and like he talks about how you can hear his finger bones like crackling on the controls. It's just cool. And then like the implied threat of that if you lose, he's going to kill you, and if you win, you get the key, right? So this is a huge moment for Wade. And he loses the first match to him. And the way you lose, it was fun because we actually played this game. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you got a high score of like 40,000, something like that, when you played. Like, out of all the games, I think that was the highest.
Yeah. We played I don't know, what do you think we spent on that game? Like $5?
Probably less, but yeah, a few dollars for sure.
A few dollars. So we played a decent amount, and a
lot of it was just trying to figure out how to play.
Exactly. So it was like trial and error at first, and then once we figured it out, I think I got like 40,000 or so, which isn't saying much, but because it was just the first few times.
What I thought was interesting is he said that he only earned 30,000 before dying the first round. So I just thought that was interesting. You know, he was saying like it was shit. He sucked it up the first time and died quickly. But it is interesting that, you know, at least one time you got further than he did on his first go.
Yeah, well, cool. I mean, so you want to talk about sucking it up? The first few times, I don't even know if we got any points, man.
No, we were terrible. We probably didn't break 5,000.
Yeah.
The game's hard.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's also interesting that he kind of has this moment where he goes, I think I'm better on the other side, like, or with the other like mount or whatever. And he asks to swap sides for the second game, and the Lich does switch sides with him. And then he plays from the other side. And then I was thinking, like, I wonder if one side is like legitimately better than the other. And that's like something that you have to be like a hardcore gamer to know. I don't know. I was just thinking about when we played side by side. You know what I mean?
It could, yeah. I mean, there's a stork and there's an ostrich, right? Or an emu or something. Ostrich. So anyway,
it's a stork and an ostrich. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one of them's bill is like slightly lower than the other. So maybe like that's his, like the one he got used to playing. Because basically you have to come down at the person with your beak, and if you're like
whoever's higher wins,
right? But you can like go back, right. You can come at each other backwards. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's like I want to play it again now. But it was actually pretty fun. But yeah, so he wins the second match and like really close, and then so it's best 2 out of 3. I should have said. And so they play the third match. It goes on for a long time, and he starts to think about like it was interesting. It was like the strategy of how you beat an AI in a video game, and how you can like learn its habits and the way the programming works, and you can use that to best it, which sounds legit to me. It sounds like someone who's played a lot of these kind of games and knows like legitimately how you develop a strategy to beat an AI.
Yeah, because at some point it does come down to patterns. Like it has to be.
So he wins the third match. The Lich transforms into Halliday's avatar, and the Star Wars music starts playing, which I thought was pretty funny. And he gets the copper key. And he immediately goes from level 3 to level 10, which I thought was pretty cool. And then the wizard disappears, and he gets this next phrase, which says, "What you seek lies hidden in the trash on the deepest level of Daggorath." And he immediately thinks, "Oh, I know where that is. There's a planet where Halliday's home. There's like a replica of his home, and you can go in, and like the Dungeons of Daggorath is like one of his favorite games." And so he thinks about how he needs to go there, but he's like, man, I need to sleep first. But he's like, who's kidding you? You know, it's been like 16 hours or something. He hasn't slept. But he's like, I'm not going to be able to. I have to do this. And he goes to leave, and he immediately encounters someone else who's like walking in and is like, who the hell are you? And it's Artemis. So she arrives.
I did really like their first scene together here.
So yeah, Artemis shows up. He's like starstruck by her, which I thought was pretty, that's understandable. I kind of had I don't know if this is true, but I consider her a lot like Felicia Day in my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like gamer. Yeah, I know who it is.
Yeah. She's in like the like geek world. She's like pretty beloved. And so I kind of thought of her, at least initially, that was kind of the way I imagined her, even though that's not really how she's described. I still kind of thought of her that way. They kind of, have like this interaction where he's being very guarded about the fact that he has the key. And it's revealed that she has been trying, and at first she says 3 weeks, but later we find out 5 weeks, but she's been repeatedly trying to beat him, and has been here like alone doing this over and over again, and has been unable to best him. And he like pretends like he hasn't either. He's like, oh yeah, I'll have to try again another time, because he's trying to be guarded about the fact that he has the key already.
Yeah, and so you can only play it like once a day before it resets, and then only one person in the whole game can play it once a day before it resets, supposedly. And then she, like, as he's like kind of trying to leave, she like decides to check the scoreboard, and his name is like jumped to the top of the list. It's the number one. He's like in the lead of the entire world looking for the Easter egg.
Yeah, and he's almost gotten out without her finding out, but she susses it out because he's acting kind of weird. And then she casts this spell, because she's a mage, and she's like in her 50s, level 50s or something. She summons this like stone wall that blocks the door, because it's a non-PvP zone, so they can't fight, but she is able to kind of trap him in at least for 15 minutes, which I think is fun, because that is actually the duration of that spell in like D&D handbooks. So just the idea of like a virtual world where you can actually cast D&D spells and they have like the same effects is just so cool to me. But yes, again, I fully recognize how geeky that is.
Yeah, that's another thing that they describe is like so there's certain spots that you can't fight at all. There's certain spots where you can't use magic, but you can use like sci-fi gear, or like places where you can't use sci-fi, but you can use magic or the blend. And I think that's really cool too.
Or there's places you can't use either. Yeah. It's like no tech, no magic zones and stuff. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, just like the idea of this universe of like where everything is possible, and I don't know, it just sounds really cool. It sounds really fun.
Yeah, I can't wait till this game comes out.
Yeah, I know, right? What's the release date on this bad boy?
Well, it's like 2040, right?
2040, yeah. Let's mark it on the calendar. What's cool is that, I mean, like, to get a little bit kind of on a aside here, but like I do believe that pop culture, we've seen it, can affect society, and it can affect game developers. And you can see like how Star Trek affected tech, and how people invented a lot of the stuff in Star Trek because the idea was so cool that like we need to make that a real thing, right?
Yeah.
And you can talk about phones and stuff, and it's like being inspired by that. And like I just wonder, is this book and the description of the Oasis going to inspire something that is like it? You know what I mean? You often see that in sci-fi, and that would be really cool. I don't know.
It would be awesome. I just think somebody's going to make this game eventually without the rights. Like, there's not going to be the references and stuff.
Well, that's the problem throughout this book that I'm always, as someone who's like, very into content creation, I keep thinking about. I'm like, how are the creators getting paid for this? I mean,
like, that's the problem with trying to make a movie out of it as well. But from all accounts so far, what I've heard is just like Spielberg's been able to basically get any reference he wanted. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but there are like planets you can go to. Like, you can go to Hoth. Like, someone's like recreated it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, there's all this stuff, and I'm always wondering, like, how are they able to put this in this game? Yeah. Is there some sort of huge licensing that like the company's paying out? If so, how can they afford it? I don't know. But if you get beyond all of that, it's just cool. It's a cool idea.
For sure.
So she asks him, so this is an important conversation they have here too. At some point in the conversation, she asks him, what would you do with the money if you did win? And he reveals he has this like kind of fantasy about like building this interstellar spaceship and getting like him and his closest friends on it and bringing a bunch of movies and games and just like peacing out and being like fucking off to another solar system.
In real life. In the real world.
IRL. Yeah, that's what he would do with the money. And she's like, she has more like altruistic, like she wants to help the world. Like she wants to try and feed the hungry and like, try and solve a lot of the world problems and try and fix the environment and stuff. So they have kind of this discussion about what they would do with the money, and they both fall kind of on different sides of a philosophical fence here, which I think is, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, and before she plays, he gives her the hint, and he says, "Why don't you try playing on the other side?" She does, and then as she's playing, the spell dissipates and he's able to leave, and he runs out while she's still playing.
Yep, and then basically as he's like on his way to the next location, he sees that like she was able to beat it thanks to his advice.
Yeah. It's soon he sees that she was able to beat it. So what did you think of that? Like, him dropping the hint there? I mean, it's clearly because he's infatuated with her, right?
Yeah, I like this part because I just thought it was fun. Like, you can see like legitimate bonding going on between them. Just like talking about references and the things that they like, and like, I don't know. And even though he's like a noob, she's like cool to him because she'd never seen anybody get to this spot yet. So obviously he knows his stuff.
Yeah, she respects his game or his like knowledge and all that stuff. And so yeah, because they're both these like Gunters too, which is like the separate whole society that's within the game that. So they respect each other for that reason. And it's interesting too, because there's a lot of like how solos might help each other even though they're not in a clan together. It's just like little things. If you might drop a hint here and there kind of thing.
Well, you'd rather it be another person who like, deserves it rather than some company.
Well, for sure. But then there's also like a sense of honor about it too, where like now, like, you know what I mean? Like where like if someone helps you, then you feel like you owe them. And then until you can help them back, like it's kind of like the scales aren't even. Yeah, kind of thing. So we kind of see that as it goes on. But yeah, so he gets out and he teleports to this place called Middletown, which is like a 1980s town that's been made as a replica of the town where Halliday grew up. And he gets into Halliday's house, and just that's when he sees that Artemis has completed it. He's at number 1 on the scoreboard, and now her name appears number 2. He goes into the house, and he has all these missed messages from H, who's been trying to contact him, but he doesn't answer them right away. He goes into Halliday's bedroom in this reproduction of his house, puts in the Dungeons Daggeroth cartridge, and goes to play it. When he goes to play it, a printer puts out a message that says "Congratulations," and the gate appears. Oh, he has to complete the game, I should say. He has to play the game and complete it, and then when he does that, the gate appears. And he opens it with the key, and it's a portal. He jumps inside, and he's kind of teleported to another realm. This realm, he is in an arcade playing Galaga, and he immediately realizes that he is I think Matthew Broderick's character from the movie War Games, and that he is literally in the movie. And so what I wanted to know is this a movie you've seen, and what did you think of this idea of like this essentially game he plays where he is like has to say the lines of this movie?
Yeah, I've definitely seen the movie. I really do like this movie actually, and this is what I was talking about with the idea that once this is created in some way, once you can become your favorite actor in your favorite movie and recreate the whole movie, people are gonna make a lot of money, and that has to happen eventually.
Yeah, it's a cool idea, right? Like I don't know, I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of movies that it would just be fun as hell, right? To kind of take on the leading role.
Yeah, and like he has to like remember all the lines and do all the actions. So he's basically like he is the actor like performing in the movie. And I don't know, I think that's really cool. And then eventually he beats it. It takes him a long time, but he beats it.
There is a cool thing where he like if he performs really well, he earns these like helper tokens that he can use to like find out what the next line is and stuff. So there is enough like in here too to kind of create it into like a game. Yeah. And he does have the feeling that if he loses, he would die. Like, and his character would die, which I don't know if we've talked about. We should talk about what happens with character death. Yeah. So if your avatar dies, you lose all of your experience, and you restart at level 1, basically, and you lose all items you had and everything, and including, anything you may have, any progress you've made in this challenge and all this stuff. So death is pretty bad in the Oasis for characters. It's kind of like a permadeath thing.
Which is crazy because it's like, if you had a game that's this long and you pour this much time into... Yeah. People would quit, because if you die from some ridiculous bullshit, you would quit.
Yeah, man, you go into PvP zones and you get jumped by a bunch of high level characters. Yeah. Yeah, it's actually pretty gnarly, honestly, but it would create a really intense gaming experience, I guess. Yeah.
Well, getting knocked down to 0 would be part of the game at that point. You would just have to be okay with being like, all right, I'm level 1 and we're back into it. And then eventually, like, people who are really good would rise to the top. But even if you're really good, eventually you're going to die.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, it's like Dark Souls to the extreme. Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty wild. But I think for this book to have dramatic tension, like it has to be. This is how this world has to work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you could just save your game, like that's this book would immediately lose a lot of tension.
Right.
So I'm glad he set it up this way. I also think it does make sense for the universe described as described. So yes, he has to complete the lines, he has to do the actions, and he completes the movie. When he does that, the war room exits out, which I guess the movie ends in the war room, and another message appears. The captain conceals the jade key in a dwelling long neglected, but you can only blow the whistle once the trophies are collected. Once all the trophies are collected. And then he's like, I don't know what that means. I'm really tired. He exits the simulation and he basically passes out. Oh, I wanted to ask you, is there any particular movie, like if you had to pick one, if you got to pick one, like what would be the movie that you would love to play as like the main character in?
Off the top of my head?
Yeah, off the top of your head.
That's a good question, dude. I'd love to be like Clint Eastwood in like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly or something crazy like that, like a cool like Western.
That'd be sweet. My initial thought is my namesake. I'd like to be Luke Skywalker in Star Wars.
Oh man, yeah, definitely.
You're like, oh shit.
that'd be cool for sure.
And it would be cool too if you could have multiple players, right? Like I could be Luke and you could be Han or something. I don't know.
That would be so sweet.
It'd be pretty cool. So anyway, he logs out. He's exhausted and he basically just passes out in his sleeping bag inside of his little van. This is an interesting moment to me, too, because I got so into this virtual world that it was almost like cold water in the face to have him exit and be in the real world again. I'm like, oh, yeah, he is in a real world. He's not just in this game. Because we had spent so much time in the game.
And you also, like, I didn't want to come out of the Oasis.
Yeah. Which, I mean, that shows just how, like, addicting this would really be, right?
Right.
If your life is miserable and you live in these slums, like, how you would be super into it.
Yeah.
The next, he wakes up and he finds out that Artemis has also completed the final gate. And he sees that the news is just blowing up. There's an interview with Ogden Morrow, which is interesting. And he is talking about how he's excited that this has happened. And the media is trying to like get him to like, say all this stuff. But he doesn't want to. And instead he talks directly to them, or at least Wade feels like it, and he says, if you're smart, you won't talk to the media and you won't reveal who you are, otherwise you're going to have vultures. And he insults the IOI, and they basically cut off his like live interview because he's insulting the company that owns the media, which I think is pretty cool. So you immediately like Ogden Morrow, right? Like I did. I was like, oh, this guy's awesome.
He's awesome for sure.
And then we do learn some more backstory here about how there was a woman named Kira who Morrow was in love with, but also Halliday was also in love with. Like, they both had a crush on her. And they ended up getting married, Ogden Morrow and Kira, and they left the company. And there was some sort of falling out between him and Halliday later on, and it seems that Morrow also started to view the Oasis as a prison and not as a game. And that he wasn't into it anymore because he wanted to be a game creator, not what the Oasis had become. So we also learned that Kira, his wife, was killed in a car accident. And it seems like he kind of became a recluse after that. And so he hasn't really been seen a lot in the outside public. And a lot of people approached him after Halliday's death and tried to get information for him, but he didn't have anything to share. So Wade then looks at his messages, and he sees that he has 2 million unread messages, which I think is pretty awesome. And he's become this like instant celebrity, right? Like because people, you can just message Parzival, like you just have to know his username, and it's public for the world to see. The only one that he responds to is he sees H has been calling him again and again and again. So he ends up calling H, and H, he talks to him for a second. He's like, I can't believe you, dog, you've been doing all this and you haven't told me about it.
They both have like this mutual respect where it's like, well, I wouldn't want to like spoil it for you. I know you're going to get there eventually, kind of thing. And he's like, well, you did kind of give me a hint, and I'm sitting out in front of the cave right now. Yeah,
he kind of moves the camera around from his like video call, and he sees that he's right outside the tomb. And it's because he knows that if Wade was able to get it, like basically it had to be on Ludus, and then as soon as he knew that, he was able to figure it out.
Because Wade was so poor that he didn't have the money to travel around inside the Oasis.
So yeah, H is right outside the tomb, and he's getting ready to go in, and Wade decides to give him a hint, and he tells him to try playing what does he say? Try playing on the other side.
Yeah, which is like he's like, oh, I don't really know why I gave him a hint, but he's my buddy, and like he like H like smiles and he's like, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and we also learned that the because Artemis completed it, that the tomb is empty and it has to respawn every day. So he's waiting for the respawn period. So he can't do it yet. H also reveals that he's worried about IROC. And he thinks that IROC is going to let slip their identities. And then once he does that, it'll become common knowledge that it's on Ludus.
Right.
He then has a message from Artemis that's like a congratulations for completing the gate. He starts receiving emails from a blackmail from IROC, who is threatening to reveal their identities. And then the next day, a pair of people appear on the high score called Daito and Shoto.
Yeah, Daito.
Daito, thank you. Daito and Shoto appear on the high score list, and they appear at the same time, so he's not sure how that works. And over those few days, he's just analyzing the quatrain over and over again, trying to figure out what to do. He agrees to some sponsorships for his avatar's image and likeness, and he agrees on the condition of anonymity, so he doesn't have to reveal who he is, but he's going to get money.
And they only last for 1 year.
Yeah, for a year. He also gets a message from Nolan Sorrento, who is like the head of the IOI organization. And he knows that he's a former game designer, and he's sent him like thousands of messages trying to get his attention. And Wade decides, all right, I'm going to talk to him.
Because he kind of wants to just fuck with him and be like, you guys are pieces of shit for trying to ruin this game for us.
Yeah, well, that's what we learned. He agrees to it, and he goes to this virtual chat room, which is set on their home world. And, to put it short, Sorrento is basically bragging, showing him how powerful they are, trying to impress upon him that, like, maybe it's hopeless. But then also, like, he's trying to offer him a job. So if you were to come work for us, where you're going to get, he offers him $2 million a year with $1 million signing bonus, and then $25 million if you complete it for us, like a bonus. So he's offering him all this money, but Wade isn't buying it, and he's kind of fucking with him. And he says, all right, I agree to it. And he's like, really? And he's like, yeah, I agree to it on 3 conditions. He's like, what are they? And he goes, I want $50 million when I complete it, not 25. And he's like, done. And then he's like, I also want your job, not the job you offered me. And then he says, and then once I get your job, I want you fired and out of the company. And this is really fun. I was laughing at this the whole time. It's just like, it's an awesome, he's just trolling him so hard right now.
Yeah.
Because he knows that his higher ups are going to agree to this. And even like Sorrento knows this too, right?
Yeah, Sorrento he's like, oh shit, and then and then he like relays the information that like the superiors are watching, and they're like, yes, you can have my job, and I'll leave. And then
and they're gonna call you like numero uno or something. Yeah. Was like his other stipulation, which was pretty funny. But then like when he's like, oh really, you're gonna do that? Then he goes, never mind, I'm not gonna do it. And so it's just like, it's awesome because it just also drives home to Sorrento how like expendable he is, right? And how he doesn't actually matter in this company.
Yeah.
But then Sorrento kind of turns the tables on him. And his second offer is for $5 million. And just one time, tell us how you got the first key. That's all you have to tell us. You don't have to tell us you don't have to help us win. Just give me the information, and we'll secretly give you $5 million, and no one will ever know. And it's a little more tempting, I think, but Wade still is just like, he hates this guy too much, and he's just like, no way, I'm not going to do it.
It's definitely tempting because it's like, it could be like, basically we know from what Wade is saying that like everybody's going to know about this eventually.
Right. So this would just be giving them information that they're probably going to have soon anyway.
Yeah.
But whether or not they would have actually made good on their deal is open to interpretation. So because then the final proposal comes up, and he this is where he turns the tables on him, and he reveals that he knows his name is Wade. He says, sit down, Wade, which is this big like moment of oh shit, because he thought he was anonymous. He also knows where he lives. He shows this aerial view of the stacks and like his particular stack that he lives in. And we learned that he was able to bribe all of the officials at the schools on Ludus, because they determined the thing about Ludus through IROC, and because of that, they got his like student information, and they figured out who he is and where, and they tracked him down. And he tells them that your entire thing has been rigged to explode, and tell us where it is or we're gonna kill you. and everyone else in your stack. And so they think he's still in there because they didn't see him when he came down the ladder, I guess. And so they don't know that he's in his little hideout. So what they're actually threatening is to kill his aunt and Mrs. G and all these other people in this stack and all these innocent people.
Yeah, and he's responsible if he doesn't do anything, but at the same time he's not in there.
Yeah, he is convinced though, and this is the thing that makes him decide, is that he's convinced that even if he tells them that they're going to kill him, that they're going to blow it up anyway,
or that they're bluffing.
Yeah, one or the other. But he thinks that they're going to want him dead because he could potentially reveal what they've done, their criminal activities. And so it'd be easier for them to just go ahead and kill him. So he's like, even if I do tell them, they're going to blow me up anyway, unless they're bluffing. So basically he says, screw you, you're never going to complete the test, and then he logs out. A few seconds later, he hears the blast, feels a shockwave. Just as he's starting to think maybe it was a bluff, it wasn't. And he runs out and he sees that there's just smoking rubble, and several stacks were taken out, and all these people have died. And he thinks about calling the police, but he doesn't. I just wanted to stop and ask you, what did you think of this, real world murder from this company? I don't know. To me, it turned the stakes up.
Yeah,
right?
That's exactly what it is. Is this moment made actual crazy stakes in the movie, because before, or in the story, because before this there was, it was just, hopefully he gets to it first and wins the prize. But now it's he's gonna die, and there's this antagonistic force that's pushing again, other than just solving the puzzles and getting there. And
antagonist is the right word. I think it introduces the primary antagonist of this novel, who up to this point we haven't heard much about, and how it's real life and death stuff going on, and that he potentially could be killed for going after this.
Yeah,
which up to then hasn't been a thing.
So yeah, and because he knows that since he didn't give them the information, they're just going to go down the list. He decides to reach out to everybody that's on the list.
Yeah, so they set up a meeting with what we learn later is called the High Five, which is these 5 names that are appeared now. And they set up a secret meeting in the basement, in H's basement. And they arrive, and he's there with H hanging out, and then Artemis is the next to arrive. And what I thought is one of the shittiest moments, because like I said, I was kind of hyper aware of it because I've heard all this criticism.
Yeah.
When she shows up, she's friendly with H, and he gets he says he gets really crazy jealous because he wants her all to himself. And that's just such a shitty thing. The idea that that possessiveness, you know what I mean? That's such an entitled thing, and the idea that he is jealous of her just having a friendly moment with H, it was pretty shitty.
But yeah, I can definitely see that. But there's definitely the idea that he's he's falling for this person, even though, he's just obsessed with her, and that.
Yeah,
that
and
would
he's
happen.
A teenager.
Exactly.
It's important to remember he's 17 at this moment, and yeah, I'm not saying it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, it is kind of shitty.
It is definitely possessive. But yeah, it's the idea that he's obsessed, obviously. It's not it's just he likes her or something. He's weirdly obsessed.
Right.
And then it kind of turns into a normal-ish thing.
It's kind of creepy, I guess, is where I'm also going.
Yeah.
This is the kind of behavior that can lead to people being stalkers and being legitimately dangerous. If you get to the point where you don't want someone else to talk to anyone else. You know what I mean? That's potentially scary shit. So yeah, that was a moment where I was ooh, I can see why people get turned off by that, for sure. Next up, we meet Daito and Shoto, and they arrive together, and Shoto reveals that, I believe it's Shoto, Daito is Shoto's little brother. Is that right?
Yes.
That's what he says, yeah.
Wait, no, the other way around.
Other way around?
Yeah,
that's what I was wondering. So Shoto is Daito's little brother?
Yes.
Anyway. So they kind of all reveal things they've learned. The Sixers have arrived on Ludus. They've set up this force field around the tomb, and they're keeping everyone out. And now they're starting to go in and play Joust. Wade reveals what happens to him and how their operation works. We also learned that they have a setup where different users can swap in and take over different avatars. And so because of that, they can cheat and put in their best Joust player can just keep doing Joust, while other people then take the avatar that has the key and use them to go on to the next thing.
Right. So they're essentially playing with unlimited numbers against people who are skilled.
Yeah, exactly. So they're cheating, but it's you can't stop it from happening in this setup. They all kind of give their own stories about how they defeated the Lich, and they all kind of hate how what the Sixers are doing. And then they consider having an alliance, but it ends up turning into a big argument because they're all solos and they all have like their pride. It makes Daito and Shoto log out because they're just like, nope, we're not gonna be in alliance with you. We're competing with you. And H is like kind of a dick about it, and so they just leave. And then there's a weird moment where some comics topple over in the corner, and H is like, it's just a glitch. Don't worry about it. So
I forgot that happened. Yeah, that is something that stood out to me when I read it, but I forgot that happened. That's definitely going to be something.
Yeah, so you're like, that's got to be something, right?
No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah. So you want to theorize about what? You haven't read the end.
Some sort of like lingering spirit of the holiday.
Okay.
Lingering programming or spirit, or he's watching, or maybe the other guy that helped make it is in there doing something. Could also just be IOI is like fully invaded or something, or
spying on them. Okay, so I won't reveal anything. High scores have now are updated to show that the IOIs are in the final 5 slots. So it's the high 5 plus then just all IOI numbers. Sorrento is the top IOI user. And then we hear about this kind of crazy thing that's happening on the planet where all of the Gunter clans are arriving and like waging war on this force field, trying to penetrate it. The clans are all like joining forces with each other, and someone ends up blowing it up with like this crazy bomb. It's like this big free for all now on the planet. Wade learns that in real life, the explosion in the stacks has been covered up as a meth lab explosion, and so that no one really cares. But back in the simulation, they are able to take down the force field, and people start going in and battling. Well, you can't battle because it's not PvP zone, but they're they're just going in, and like the IOI is like trying to make it hard for them to get in, but there's just sheer numbers are able to do it. And so people start completing it, and like more names start getting added. But the IOI was able to do like 60 before it comes out. And we find out that what happens is if you enter with more than one person at the same time, then like multiple copies of the Lich spawn. And so that's how more than one person is able to do it per day.
Yeah.
So back in real life, Wade decides he needs to go to Columbus, which we learn is also where IOI is located. And that's because it's this like mecca of like tech, and there's all this power and like the best internet connection to the Oasis. Like the closer you are to it, the better connection you're gonna have. He buys a bus ticket, hops on a bus, and on his way there, he is able to use the money he has to get onto the black market and like clear his citizen profile with the government, and literally change his identity. And create a false identity. And he's doing this to protect himself from the IOI, who's proven that they're willing to kill him.
He's going on the run, and he's got considerable funds from all of his sponsorships. You can pull money out of the Oasis to be real-life money as well as vice versa.
Right. Yeah, because, Oasis funds are, like, worth more than the dollar now. So he also rents an apartment on the way and sets it up so that he can get there. And he arrives, and he gets to his new apartment, which is this tiny little, like, concrete square. Feels like he's having a panic attack because he's realizing that he's this fugitive on the run and that his life's in danger. But he goes inside and he sets up his new rig that he orders online, and he closes the door, and he vows that he's basically not going to leave this room until he completes the contest and gets the egg. Yeah, so that's the end of level 1. What's your final thoughts about this first part here with him kind of like kicking off the contest and getting through the first gate and everything? Like, what's your takeaway?
It really pulled me in, and I'm really invested in the characters now, and I want to know what happens next and where we're going. I think it's awesome that he's like rich now, and he has all these funds to like make himself safe and basically like have a different identity.
Yeah, it's like it's rags to riches. It's the stakes have been turned up. It's life and death now. He's on the run. There's just a lot of cool moving stuff happening at this point in the story. We've got all the major players. We have the scoreboard. I think this is a really approachable book. This is a low barrier for entry. And I'm not saying that as an insult. I think this is a book that a lot of people can enjoy and recognize and participate in. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. Part 2 gets into some crazy new areas, and I'm excited to get to that. I guess we should go ahead and say how we're going to cover it. Our initial plan was to do 1 and 2 together, but we realized that it's just too much. So we have actually read part 2, but we're gonna do that in a separate episode. We're gonna release as a bonus episode on Monday, which we don't normally do. So this episode you're listening to now will have released on Thursday.
Yeah, it'll be a bonus in the fact that it's basically like, it's just an extra episode. It's not like it's a bonus episode that you shouldn't listen to. It's still going to be part of our full coverage of the book.
Yeah, part 2 will release on Monday, and then part 3 will be our regular release, which is on Thursday. That's just because we wanted to do it all justice. You know, we didn't want to rush anything too much. So it's just more content, so hopefully you'll come along for that. That's our plan for how we're going to do it. So yeah, Monday, assuming that we're able to do it in time, there's a chance we don't release it till Tuesday, but hopefully Monday. All right, so if you'd like to keep in contact with us, the best way to do it is to follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at Ink2Film, we are on Twitter at Ink2Film, and we are on Instagram also at Ink2Film. Definitely connect with us on there. I'd love to talk with you about this, and you can also send us feedback to our email address, which is ink2film@gmail.com.
And I mean, if you'd like to support this podcast, you can subscribe and tell others to subscribe, and also rate and review. Leaving reviews is really helpful on any site that you do it on. iTunes, Spotify, anywhere helps us out. And lastly, we just want to say thank you to Audible for our affiliate link. Again, that affiliate link is audibletrial.com/ink2film.
Yeah, and I also wanted to thank Crown Publishing Group, who provided us with our books that we gave out and with our copies of our movie posters that we're going to be giving out. Once again, if you wanted to win those or have a chance to win those, sign up for our newsletter, our newly minted newsletter, and you will get a shot. You will automatically be entered to win that, assuming you're in the contiguous U.S. states.
Yeah, and thank you to Techno Axe's royalty-free music for the use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's it for Level 1. We hope you join us again for Level 2. Until then, I'm Luke.
And I'm James.
You've completed the first gate.